Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee, March 25th, 2026. We are still trying to get to a fiscal year 27 budget. There's been a flurry of activity in the last couple of days with new ideas being circulated and new rationales and new justifications for things. Well, I should say, please silence your devices so we don't get interrupted. So we're going to spend this evening getting our arms around what the proposed changes are and what they might mean for us. And then if time allows, which I certainly hope it does, we'll start taking some votes. I don't anticipate we're going to get done tonight, but I would like to get closer. So we passed out a bunch of paper. I'll just briefly walk through what I gave you. There's one called Budget History of the General Stabilization Fund, which is kind of a mostly white sheet. And what this does is track our history of stabilization. We never had stabilization until 2012, when we put $300,000 in it and we started earning money on it. We kept building up the balance by fairly significant amounts of money, $750,000, $670,000, $450,000, for quite a while, all through the teens. We put away a lot of money. That's because the education reform hit in 2009, and it made it much more favorable for Holden, and money was flowing into us, and Rutland was drowning, which is the opposite of what had happened for the 15 years before that. And then in 2019, the formulas changed again, and the funding to the school district slowed, and you can see our contributions to stabilization slowed. We went from $500 a year to $300 to $200 to $100, and then you can see in those later years we started taking out a lot of money. We've been taking money out specifically for projects, classrooms, library windows, Eagle Lake, local roads, and things like that. This year, this budget, as it's currently presented to us, is calling for taking over $2,100,000 out just to keep the town running. Not for anything capital, not for anything long-term, just to keep people employed and buildings open and lights on. So that is a dramatic change, and not for the best. So I thought that was interesting. The other sheet I have about stabilization is stabilization balances. It's got a lot of gray bars at the top. And what this is straight from DLS. It computes what our operating budget is for each year and what the stabilization balance is and what that stabilization fund as a percentage of the budget is. And then it adds in the other, what they call special purpose stabilization funds, fire, DPW, open space, and we used to have a fund called the IIF, and what those percentages of the budget was, and it adds them together and figures the total percentage. So if you look over at the far right-hand column, the total budget, total stabilization as a percentage of the budget, at one point was 16% of our budget we had saved in stabilization. We then used over $1,300,000 of that in order to build the public safety building, and we went down to 8%. We got back up over 10% for a couple of years, and the last 4 years we've drained it, and we're down to 4% now. So again, we are using our funds much more rapidly than we ever did before. And then the third sheet that I handed out is about certified free cash. Free cash is the money that's left over at the end of the year from if you didn't use all the money you were budgeted for. If you were able to hire a police officer, but you had an open position for 3 weeks before you actually got someone to work there, you had 3 weeks of unpaid payroll, et cetera. Or if you were going to spend $45,000 for a car and you only spent $40,000, $5,000 is unspent. So that all winds up in a balance called free cash, which is then available to us to use in future years. At the bottom of that, there's a list of the certified free cash balances, again, pulled straight from the state records. And you can see that we used to have free cash equal to under 4% of the budget every year up until 2013, 2014. And a lot of that was because we had a prior manager who did not believe in free cash. He tried to spend everything every year. We also didn't have stabilization until 4 years after he retired. So that was a strategy decision made by the town manager and the finance committee at the time. Since then, we have started generating more and more free cash every year. Now remember, free cash is money, essentially money that we took from taxpayers but we didn't use. And we're going to use it in future years. It hasn't gone away, but it is money that we took unnecessarily. And we're now running somewhere around 1 year's 11%, 1 year's 9%, 8%. So we have significantly more free cash coming in recently. The top section is called a free cash proof, which again is taken directly from the DLS website. And what it does is it starts with free cash coming out of the prior year and then adds in the various major components. And there's two major components of it, one of which is when you estimate revenue, if you get more revenue than you estimate, so you say you're going to get $1 million in state aid and you actually get $1.1 million, you have $100,000 of free cash. And the other major item is the unexpended appropriations in the police officer situation where you didn't hire someone for 52 weeks, you only hired someone for 45 weeks, you have a little bit of unexpended revenue. So those are the two major components. So the first highlighted area is the revenue side of it. And it shows that over the last 5 years, which ends in 2025 because they're complete fiscal years, so June 30th, 2025 is the last year it's been completed, we have averaged $1.7 million more in revenue than we actually budgeted for. And then the next highlighted area is unexpended appropriations, which is what the expense side of that, where you don't spend everything you budget, and we're averaging right around $1.7 million of that as well. So just as a little history lesson of where we're at, when it comes to spending free cash, we have a history of generating fairly significant free cash recently. So to the extent we cut down on generating free cash, we'll have more available to you, lower taxes, or the same amount of taxes can be used for more definite things. And stabilization balances, I just found it was interesting that we are very clearly draining our savings, and have been. And this budget in particular was a desperation move. Peter had to dip deeply into our savings in order to get the budget to come anywhere close to balancing. Even with the draconian cuts that we've seen in the budget, we still needed $2 million out of savings to get to this point. So we are in dire straits. This budget is funded on the back of unsustainable money. We do need more money into this, new revenues into this budget, or we need to dramatically change the expenses going out, which I don't believe anyone really wants to contemplate what that means. But on the savings balances, one of the things I found instructive was we have $2,400,000 in round numbers in savings at this point. We're using $2.1 million in this year's budget to keep the doors open. That means we could possibly do one more year, and then the savings are gone, but all the expenses are still here. So 2 years, the lights go out if we don't do anything. It's not sustainable. So with that, I will ask Peter, you mentioned you had some changes that you've identified and you want to talk about. You sent us a memo that highlighted a couple of the top-level ones. He's got even more paper than I do.
I suppose we can start with if there are questions on it or anything that I said in there. Does anyone disagree with anything? Does anyone?
Since we got like many memos in the last 2 days, maybe it'd be helpful for you to summarize. Sorry, I know you're
Right.
trying to scramble for the papers, but
Yeah, I was thinking we would get something highlighting what it is.
We need to start color coding our papers.
In the absence of that, could somebody find his memo on your email? I mean, if he doesn't have it, maybe we just read the memo, pick off the highlights from it.
Maybe you could put it up on the screen.
Can you put his memo up on the screen?
She's not on the internet.
Printed my own memo.
So, what are you looking for? You want to start with DPW?
Did you?
I think that would be since that was one of the main questions
Your mic.
in terms of, some of the changes that were suggested and why.
Walk through the memo.
Sure.
Okay, I think I can do that because I put notes on it. Okay, so let me get the right memo now. I said I had it. Okay, so DPW changes that occurred in the last, I think, day. We just got an email today with a memo attached for it. There were some answers to some questions in here. One of the questions that we had in our spreadsheet was, are we double counting for the maps that have been added in the assessors? And it sounds like they still are going to be using them. So we do need that in both places. The second question was around building and grounds maintenance for the parks. Why did it go from 63,000 to 140,000? And there was a very detailed explanation as to why 140,000. The third question was around water sewer, occupying 18% of the industrial drive building. We call it the DPW building, but water sewer offices are in there also. They're currently paying $75,000 towards combination of maintenance and market value of the space that they occupy. There's a further explanation on that further down, so I'm going to come back to that. The first proposed budget change in it was the DPW vehicle charges, which I know we had talked about before, about whether we need to invest in DPW vehicles, given that the budget is so tight. The DPW director did give us two suggested changes to make, and I'll put them in the spreadsheet. One was to reduce the building and grounds vehicle equipment capital down to zero. It was, round numbers, $170,000. Take that out, but also add a little bit to the vehicle and equipment replacement for the highway division. But net, it reduces their budget by $114,292. So he has already suggested that we make that change. So that's a plus of, I'm just writing it down so I remember to put it in the spreadsheet, the 114,292 to the good for us.
It is with a caveat, though.
There is, yeah, Peter, go ahead.
No, just that he would desperately like us to go back to the formula that we had originally planned
Good point.
two or 3 years ago. And next year, we have to assume that there would be a pretty steep bump in
Right.
vehicles for DPW.
The next item was, we had proposed in our spreadsheet reducing the association dues by $800. And the explanation around that was that the positions, there was only one engineer that could be using this line, and now there are three. So he strongly requests that we don't take that $800 out. so that the 3 professionals can maintain current with their, their training and certifications and such. The next one, DPW Engineering Stormwater NPDES permit. We had already received an email, I believe we got that last week from him, and he agreed that we could reduce that from $35,000 down to $15,000. So that's a $20,000 savings. That change is already in the spreadsheet that you have the printed copy for. DPW Building Grounds and Field Maintenance, we had proposed moving the $15,750 from the DPW budget for the turf maintenance of the NOAC fields. In the spreadsheet, it says to the rec revolving account. I think we might have meant to the NOAC account, not the rec revolving. Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads. I didn't make that change in the spreadsheet because I wanted to confirm that with everybody. And he very nicely said, you know, if we do that, that the DPW would still be willing to manage that contract and arrangement, but it would be paid for out of a different place.
And just as an addendum on that, I think that rec had already intended to have 15,000. I mean, I know they have it already in their budget, so you'll see it reflected. And it won't have to be added, is my point. It just needs to be reduced from, it was double counted.
It was double
So
counted.
DPW thought they were doing it, rec thought they were doing it, and rec is. But it should be managed by Public Works because it would allow them to coordinate all the other work that goes on there.
Right, yeah, it's up their alley for that kind of work. Okay, the DPW water and sewer transfer to the general fund proposed $100,000 increase to account for the additional contributions to the general fund to cover for the quote-unquote renting of the space. His response, and I think I'm going to read this. If the committee were to increase this line item, I would suggest a deeper review of the amount of space utilized versus the cost of the building that have been appraised. Water and sewer already pays their fair share. That's the $75,000 that I mentioned a few minutes ago of the building utilities and the sum of money to account for their use of space. Ultimately, the impact of this would be a decrease in free cash balance of the water and sewer enterprise fund, because money would, and we haven't reviewed water and sewer yet, but if we increase the market value rent for their space, the water sewer enterprise fund would go down by that amount, and the DPW revenue would go up, or the transfer of the funding. Okay, and then here's some of the important things. So additional capital items not addressed.
Donna, one thing, just to
Okay, go
hit
ahead.
back on that issue.
Yep.
Informally, water sewer commissioners, and I don't want to speak for them, sort of addressed this last night outside, and they seemed pretty strongly opposed to it. But again, I won't speak for them, just to let the committee know.
Okay. Did any more around that? I mean, they were opposed to it, but,
No, and I don't want to, I'm just letting the committee know
okay,
the vibe I caught.
okay, we'll have to talk to them. That's the Board of Selectmen, right? Okay. Okay, additional capital items not addressed. Oh, sorry, you have a question?
Peter, just to clarify, so the opposition was to increasing the rent, is that it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Ryan Josty called me yesterday or the day before, whatever day it was, recently, and said, I've got a copy of your spreadsheet. I just want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting, because he saw that there was something that was missing, and that was the retrofitting the recreation building. Just to give the background on this, right? The recreation department is going to be moving to the pool area, which makes a lot of sense because that's where all of their work is. They've got the pool, they've got the before and after care, they've got the summer camps. So working out of that space makes sense for them. There is some funding that we have to build those offices over there. The retrofitting the current recreation building, formerly known as the old police station, would be where the folks that are currently located and working in the Starboard building would move out of Starboard and to that building because of the structural issues that are occurring in the Starboard building. We had originally had that deferred off the list, and Ryan was very concerned. And just spoke with Peter before the meeting, and we said, we do need to put that back in somewhere, whether it's in the primary budget, whether it's in as an override item, but that is an item that we collectively should have had in, and it wasn't. So that was a big one, because that's $504,000. Sarah?
I just want to clarify, because I saw something in the memo that was new to me, I think, but of course, we get a lot of information. Is the Starboard building closing? Because the memo said it was closing, which I had not heard before.
I'm not aware of the building commissioner declaring that it needs to close anytime in the immediate future.
Do we think, okay, so anytime in the immediate future, meaning like we think it's more likely than not gonna be, have to be formally, officially, you have to leave in this upcoming fiscal year?
No one can answer that, including engineers much more,
Right.
Knowledgeable than I, because of the deficiency of the structure, because of the way it's put together. No one can really come up with a full appraisal. Every single architect and engineer that's gone up to the attic has looked at it and said, oh my God, I don't know what could happen here. I don't know how to evaluate this, but it could last, it could collapse next month, or it could last into,
I don't like
another
to hear
30
that.
years. So that's the problem. There's that no one can give us a real good assessment on how, but they all say it's not good.
Okay. I guess I feel like I need clearer direction. Like, are we treating this as an emergency, or are we not? That's really important to understand, whether we can put it on the override and risk it not passing, whether we cannot. I mean, so that's why I'm asking for clarity.
And we can talk about that. I haven't put it in the spreadsheet yet, and as we go through, and I mean, we're still moving money around, we're still, we've talked about the things that we've put in the spreadsheet, but we haven't voted on anything yet. And I've got a tally now so that we can tell, are we over, are we under, are we over, as we change things. So I think that we'll be able to see that. I mean, one of the options that could happen, but we don't like it, I believe, is we could borrow for that instead of paying for it outright. Now, that puts our debt up, which we don't want to do. But these are all options, right?
So there are three things in the list that Peter gave us of budget reductions right at the beginning of the process. And this retrofit of the old police station, current rec department, was one of them. There's also $50,000 to study a new town office feasibility, basically to come up with a plan. You're saying nobody knows at this point. We need to put some thought into this and figure out what are we going to do. And then there's a third item there, Starboard Structural Solutions, another $370,000, which I think would, to me, sounds like, okay, we did the study said you need to fix this and that and the other thing, and this is the money to accomplish that. Is that?
No.
No?
I think that would be more of a deep dive engineering look at, even potentially a new building.
Which one would be?
The 370.
Okay.
It would cost far more than $370,000 to make Starboard usable.
Okay, so this is, that 370, which is now not in the budget, has been removed from the budget, but the original thought was that's a deep dive into.
I had interpreted that
Or-
differently.
Or is it just replacing the roof, which again
Yeah, so
isn't
I-
adequate.
I think the 370 is the lowest possible number. It could be over $1 million to make fixes. Up is right. So the 50,000 is to do a study on what would be needed for town offices. If we were starting from scratch, given the number of people in the administration and the various needs that they have, what would their needs be? And then we have options from there, right? After we get all that information, then you can look at, well, do we look at trying to fix Starboard, which has the unknown number on it, which could go through the roof. It's a pretty old building. As you start tearing it apart, you can find things that you didn't anticipate. And if we spend more than 30% of the value of the building, then you have to bring it all up to code, right? So that's one option.
Which is
Or
also physically impossible to bring it up to ADA standards.
the ADA issue, right?
And it's literally impossible physically to make the hallways wider. They're load-bearing walls. It's
Right.
It's a tear down at that
It is,
point.
it is what it is. It is the building that it is. Or you could start with a new building, ground up, and then that would have to be a design, architect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and estimate that and figure out where to go from there. In the meantime, the folks are all that work in Starboard today are working out of the current rec building, old police station.
They are?
Well, they would be if we fund the $504,000 for them to move there and retrofit that building for that.
So is that putting the cart before the horse?
Here's why I phased it the way I did. As long as we can get rec to their new location, that's the primary biggest thing. If we can get rec out of that building in its new location, if, God forbid, the roof started cracking and we heard noises, or the building commissioner came in and said, you have to get out of here now, we could literally pick everything up and just move it over to, unplug everything and plug it back in with the state of our IT and the way we've got everything set up over into the police station. It would be a lousy situation. It would be very awkward. It wouldn't be great, but we could continue to function if there was an emergency situation of that sort. So that's why I phase in, and just as long as we definitely can move rec out, then we have a tough, lousy option. Cable doesn't have any place to go. It's not a complete project, but there's still that possibility. Obviously, the better case scenario is to fit the building properly and then also bring cable in, because their lease ends, I think, in November of 27. So it'd be more ideal to be able to move them around like that.
Stephanie?
Peter, are there any local offices? I don't know how many people are in Starboard now. Are there any local offices that you could rent instead of spending $500,000 to do the police station over, that would get you through the year or two that you would need, that would be cheaper?
Or we could do modulars in the parking lot or something like that, or we could,
But are there
we can
any-
get creative. I don't think so. But even if there is that, the market fluctuates. They might be here today, they might be gone tomorrow. So that's tougher. That would be kind of a seat of the pants thing. If something happened, that we would suddenly look around and see what's available.
Yeah, it's
now.
just
So-
that's a lot of rent. $500,000,
Yeah.
goes a long way. You could rent for a long time and not waste time. I mean, it sounds like you don't want the old police station to be the permanent solution. So
Yeah, I agree.
maybe it shouldn't be the solution. Maybe it should be something more commercial that you can live in for a few years. Or while they figure out if you're going to tear down Starboard or put up a new building or whatever the case may be.
For my offices and for the town accountant's offices, it might not matter, but for front-facing offices and like the treasurer's office, it has to be secure as well. It's a little bit more awkward, and it is more demanding on the kind of space that we need, along with the assessor. Maybe we could squeeze them into town hall where the town clerk used to be. And we would get creative. If it was an emergency situation, we'd figure it out. But that's why I phased it the way I did, just because I thought we could get by.
No, and I totally understand your rationale on that, but I'm just thinking bigger picture. It kind of feels like we're wasting $500,000 when maybe there's another solution. Maybe not, but just a thought.
Okay.
So then the recommendation at this point is that this should be in this budget some way or other. we can talk about how to fund it, but we should plan on doing this. Al?
Is this $500,000 intended to lead to a permanent solution, or is this going to be something temporary at the old police station? The reason I ask is it doesn't seem to be part of any kind of a pre-planned master plan in terms of town offices or senior centers or anything else, and it should be, I feel, and rather than just saying, hey, we've got this available building, we're going to jury-rig something in there for $500,000 and we'll be done with it.
I mean, I think cable would stay there no matter what, and it could probably, work as town offices of some sort, whether it would be our centralized office or whether eventually we could build a new starboard. That's several years in the future, so, and it requires a whole lot of extra what ifs. It's in the historic district. Can the building be sold for something? It's goes beyond just a plan, because there's more to it than that. Do people want our administrative offices in the center of town? I know some have expressed that that's the only place that we should have them. For me, I don't think it matters, but others it might. So there's a political aspect to it as well that I don't control. But I think for the near future, I think that moving to 1170 Main Street, which is the former police, I think that's the easiest way to start calling it.
What is the address?
1170 Main Street.
1170 Main.
May limit the confusion of calling it police and rec and former.
And now administrative offices.
I
think that would serve us well for a reasonable time.
Well, and then continuing that thought, if it may or may not be a 10 or 20 year or longer solution, do we have a cost estimate of what it would be to cheap this out as much as possible up at the old rec building and instead of barging ahead with a $500,000 project?
I think
get you in there, get you safe, and get a functional period with no frills.
Yeah, I think that's what Ryan has here. I think the majority of that cost is probably building out the basement, which is in pretty rough shape, mostly for cable. The rest of it is relatively minor alterations, I think, but I don't know. I haven't seen Ryan's full plan.
Seems to me, and I don't know if this is fair, you tell me if this is fair or not, you've been in that building for, 11 years now. You know it's bad, but you've lived with it. It hasn't fallen down on you yet. And we brought Brian in, who's an expert in these buildings, and he looked at it and said, oh, my God, what are you doing here? Kind of opened your eyes or opened everyone's eyes that it really is worse than we thought. You knew it was bad. You've been living with it, the hot and the cold and all the rest of it. But now we have an expert on it, and he's kind of saying this really needs to rise in priority. Is that a fair?
That is a fair example. Others have said it, and in fact, we had the former building commissioner in the office the other day, just coincidentally, and he gave us a very long explanation about how the building has been collapsing on itself for years, and he used to crank up the jack in the basement to raise the floor and the first floor and all that, and we've taken out all the filing cabinets because they weigh too much, and everything that goes on, and the mold in the basement is overwhelming. We knew all that, but we come to work.
You get a fresh set of eyes on it, and all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah, this isn't adequate.
Yep.
Jane?
Yes. My thinking, and it's only based on this very short conversation, is that we're talking about putting quite a lot of money into one or two very old buildings. $500,000 into the small building where the rec department is now, formerly the police station. And I'm not sure that I understand exactly what the Starboard Structural Solutions figure represents, $370,000. But we're looking either at $500,000 or $880,000 that, to me, their use is questionable. I mean, I would be inclined to look at every possible commercial location, even if that was temporary, to see if any might fit for a few years.
Be nice if we had an office building in town that has some vacancies, but I don't know that we do. So,
If we could get clarity on the breakdown between about $500,000 that would be just for cable, and what would be, just to bring it up to, kind of bare minimum standard, I think that would really clarify. And if it is a high percentage that's for cable, I think that sort of changes my perspective on it. Especially if we do see that building being a long-term solution for cable, right? Because right now we are renting, and that, if we've got a nice space for it, then that we want to maintain in our portfolio of real estate, then we should, that's a nice opportunity, I think. But I also will say that I like what Al sort of alluded to. We have some beautiful buildings in town, and we have some not so beautiful buildings in town, as we're discussing here. The senior center probably falls into the that second category. If there were a bigger project here at some point, then we could contemplate having other administrative offices here. And I'm somebody who likes having folks in the center of town, and this is kind of close enough. So I think that shouldn't be lost either.
Okay.
All right.
We have two more DPW items that were in the memo. The first one is we had $100,000 originally in the budget for hazardous.
Well, Donna, now that I said we're done now, maybe I'll undone us.
Okay, undo.
So where do we go with this? We have a week to make a decision on whether to approve this in the budget or not. You're asking for more information, which is pretty detailed, I think. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get that estimate in a reasonable period of time. Are we comfortable including this, knowing what we know about it, or, what are we going to do with this? Al?
I'd be comfortable talking about it when we get to talking about the override, but I wouldn't be comfortable talking about it in terms of the operating budget. This is historically tremendously late to be adding things of this amount to the operating budget, which we have yet to really start addressing, I might add, and I think we need to.
Yeah, to add on to what Al said, my thought, first of all, I don't think it was added as late as we think. I think it was a mistake. And that mistake, through distributing the spreadsheet, was brought to our attention. And my thought in terms of how to handle it is, I think we put it in the spreadsheet with the other items, and that's how we're going to balance the budget. And we're going to figure out if we can do it, how we can do it. In terms of the thing that would take more than a week would be considering, are there other options like renting space somewhere else? And would there be other options to rent space somewhere else when we have the money to do that, which wouldn't be after July 1st? And even if we found something, would it be available then? I don't know if we can do that in a week.
Right, that's the problem. And Sarah's question about, what would it cost just to make this building acceptable for the town offices to move there, and hold off on doing the cable fixings in the basement, which Peter has described as probably most of the money, which is not nearly as urgent because they do have a lease and they are in a safe place. We don't need to address them on the same urgency timeline as we need to address Starboard, evidently, I wouldn't think. So, but we're not going to get that answer, in the next 6 days either. So,
I'm happy to share my opinion now. I mean, for me, this project is one that I would be comfortable putting on the override list. I mean, I think there's a compelling case for it. I think that but we trying to wedge it into the operating budget when we already know that, anything we do there is creating a significant level of angst/anger in different parts of our operating sort of environment. For me, I think that this is really compelling. I would like to see the breakdown. I don't need the detail. I suspect that Ryan already has, he can give us a high level at least, sort of breakdown between this would be cable and this would be everything else. I think it's a long-term solution for cable. And to be quite frank, having that building, and even if it only is a 3-year or 5-year solution for town hall offices, then it becomes a flex space. You know, if we ultimately do this building and we need to move some senior center staff, I mean, you kind of need that flexibility. I don't know that renting a commercial property in town is a really efficient way, unless you can get like a longer term lease. I'm just not sure exactly how that would work. I foresee a lot of challenges with that logistically from a public management perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So,
Does that answer your question?
So we put it on the override list.
We put it on the ads list, and we figure out
So I
if
just
we can fund it.
focusing on Al's distinction between the budget and the overrides. I understand that distinction.
Yeah, we can put it
I
on
just
the
was
override.
thinking of, are we voting to go forward on this or not? But I guess the override list would be a decision in a couple of weeks, once we know what the override solution is. If the override passes, then we have to figure out what to authorize with it and take that to town meeting as a separate decision. I guess I agree with Al's distinction there, so, okay, thank you.
Okay, so back to the other two capital items from the DPW. $100,000 was originally put in the budget for hazardous tree removal. That's something that we do every year. That was brought down to zero, and the DPW director noted that there is going to be a significant amount of hazardous tree removal done this fiscal year, so it's probably okay for a year for that to come down some, but there is a concern that there always is something, right? We have a lightning storm and a tree falls in the road, kind of thing. So he is suggesting that we keep at least 20,000 in for hazardous tree removal for things that just happen and aren't proactive and weren't anticipated.
So that is not a reduction of the budget. That is an add of $20,000.
That it would be an
Not
add.
in the budget
Right.
currently.
Right.
It's been zeroed out currently.
So I'll put that on the ads tab, and when we vote, we'll decide, does it stay or does it go? And then last one is the local roads and sidewalks, $350,000 removed. Little history on this. We used to have about $350,000 or $330,000 that was funded by the town, and then we also get the Chapter 90 money, which is equal to that. We got that for FY26 from the state. That comes from that quote-unquote millionaire's tax. So we brought the additional amount, the $350 that the town contributed to that down to zero, because now we're getting the $660,000 from the state as opposed to half and half. Did I say that right? The last part I said, the last way I said it was the right way. Used to be half and half town, half state. Now we're getting the whole 660 from the state. The comment in the DPW memo is, but prices are also going up, and it behooves us to not 100% rely on the state money. That we should be funding that sum. His suggestion, if at all, it says, if at all possible, and understanding the current budget climate that the town faces, I request consideration if this item can be funded to at least some partial amount. He didn't suggest an amount there. But I would, at a minimum, caution against future use of this line item as a target for budget reductions. In other words, if we keep it a really low amount this year, that shouldn't become precedent-setting, is the way I read that. So he's suggesting that we keep a little bit more than the 660. That would be an add.
Jane?
I imagine we're keeping a list of possible surprises that will eventually be discussed when we talk about the FinCom reserve. And maybe this is one of those increases which will go into that discussion.
Peter, this was not a FinCom removal. This was one that was on the original capital list that Peter removed. And we talked about it briefly during the night of that hearing. I don't know if you want to, we were getting the money from the state, and you thought for 1 year that would be adequate.
Right, we're getting additional money that almost made it a rinse. Yeah, and the DPW director would prefer to keep it, so.
Right,
Everybody prefers to keep it.
Right.
right,
I don't know what else to say about it, but,
Right.
right. But it was there's more than the usual amount of state money coming in to help us, so.
more than in the past, yeah.
Right, so we're not cutting out roads altogether in any way, shape, or form, so.
Okay, so there were other, to Sarah's point, there were other memos that we received. We received a memo about excise taxes. We received a memo about from the police chief about his concern about our line item of cutting the.
Before we move on from DPW, that
Yep.
was nice that you had that. It's not the one I was referring to.
Oh, you have another one for DPW?
I do, and perhaps I didn't share this with the committee.
Okay.
But Peter sent me one this morning, 11 a.m., talking about how Nick was bringing us this memo, but also raising the question of funding the DPW depreciation account as one issue. And the second issue he raises here is he's been trying to get the IT vendor to do a deeper dive as to what might change next year, and he hasn't gotten anything on that yet. So we're not ready. So we're not ready to do anything with the IT budget because you have no further information there.
I should have it. I went back and forth with the vendor today, but they weren't available to get it. They weren't in the office, so I should have it in the next couple of days.
So perhaps by next week, when we get together to look at this, we might have some more information on that, for good or ill. Then he says, Rec was intending to pay some of the costs that DPW had assumed they were paying, so there's some double dipping. We talked about that. And then the issue about the DPW depreciation fund. So what that is, just to get everyone up to speed, several years ago, for many years, the Finance Committee reviewed every piece of equipment that DPW wanted to buy individually, and we tried to opine on whether we should buy this truck or that truck. And then we kind of decided we were out of our element. We didn't have the expertise necessary to make really discerning decisions there. We weren't necessarily adding value to the process. Al had a concept, or we had a concept, and Al implemented it, of kind of figuring out, given the vehicles we currently have and their age and their depreciation status and everything, how much money do we need to put aside every year to fund the DPW? And we would give them a chunk of money in an account that they could then use to purchase the vehicles that they felt were best, because they're the experts on it. And if they spent it all, they didn't have any rolled over to the next year, but if they only spent a portion of it, then the rest of it would roll over to the following year. So they weren't use it or lose it. You know, they could save it and use it the following year if necessary. I think we did that for 1 year, and then we ran out of money. So last year in this budget here, we have shortchanged them and just given them an amount, which isn't necessary, isn't adequate to achieve the goal of the fund, which is to be self-sustaining and to build up the right amount of money. So that's what that reference, that comment about this fund was intended to get at. The issue here is not the fund or the vehicles. The issue is the money to fund it. So I don't know how we can't necessarily address the lack of funding there. Peter has indicated that fund, the original calculations in that fund are calling for a significant increase next year because, and I don't know why, I assume a couple of very expensive vehicles are dying or scheduled to die. Peter's been warning us about the dangers lurking in next year's budget. This year's budget is tough to swallow, and that includes a significantly lower education assessment than we can expect to get in the future, because they had those turn of events that we heard from the super last week. And then these vehicles are another one, and there's, you know, there's always the regular things coming up. So we need to just keep in mind that we're talking about a one-year budget, but we're not talking about a one-year solution. You know, we need to keep the multi-year in view, which Jane has been pushing us to do for 2 years, and we don't get our arms around very well. But Stephanie?
I just want to ask you, Peter, because I understand and I feel for all of your department heads that no one wants to cut anything. We get that. And in fact, they want to add. We get that too. But the reality is we can't do that. So you read all these memos. I don't really want to go through every line item again. We had the hearing. We heard everybody out. We asked the questions. We know we're in a bad situation. Is there anything in these memos that you feel is top priority, must be added, you didn't realize it was a mistake, like it sounds like the $500,000 for the building or whatever, that you can just tell us so we don't have to go through, I mean, we all read it, I get it, you know, some were rude, some were not, but I think that we know the situation. So what do you need from these memos? Is there anything we really have to add? And if not, can we move on to making decisions?
No, and I appreciate you in this question. You have to understand that we go through this whole process, you know, starting in November. So we went through the whole thing, and, you know, I did these exercises where I said, well, why don't we just cut 15% across the budget, you know, everybody's budget, or 10%, or whatever it is. And then the department heads come back and say, well, you can't do that because of this, and you can't do that because of that. And so, you know, I was frustrated well before several of you have been dealing with the same stuff. And then beyond that, you know, we did cut an extra $200,000 out of their line items, you know, and I just redlined it. They didn't like that, but, you know, we have to do it. But we made, you know, I made sure we went back and forth, and I said, well, you know, if we lose this, you know, is it really going to be that detrimental? And they would say, well, you know, we can live with that. We can change this and move that around. So that's why we had that $200,000 of the line items. And then prior to that, you know, I cut out a lot of capital. And prior to that, I had told them, you know, make it as lean as you can to start with. So we go through all this process, and now we're down to really kind of bare bones. And I understand that the committee needs to do the same thing, but we've already reached a point where, you know, these aren't just discretionary lines. These aren't just something that we can say, well, we underspend here, so we spend more there. A lot of them are still contractual. We can't go to Verizon and say, we're just going to pay 15% less this year, even though we have a contract for your cell phones. We can't go to Rico and say, I know we're paying, you know, we have the contract for the maintenance on our copiers and our printers, but we're going to have to pay you 10% less. You just can't do it. So when you keep constricting everything down, we can't touch the salaries, we can't touch these contracts, then it leaves you at such a small amount that I think you're seeing that you're cutting, that maybe you can take another 20 or 30,000 out of a department, but that 20 or 30,000 has a very, very minimal impact on the overall budget, but it has a huge impact on their operations. So that's why they've gotten so uptight, the department heads, about cutting us down anymore from that point forward. And so I have to support what they have to say, because they live with this budget, and they work through it every year, and they're not at a point where just saying, I just like to have stuff. That is the bare bones at this point. And if we go further, we're going to have some problems.
I get that, but we don't have the money. So I'm not saying we don't want to cut for the joy of cuts. We have X dollars that we can spend that you have told us this is what we have.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of the situation if we don't get that override. So we need the list, you know, we need that austere budget that we've been talking about that balances. And that's all we're trying to get to. We're not trying to cut things to hurt people. We get it. It hurts. You know, so I just wanted to hear from you. Like, we've already gone through all of this. We've felt their pain. We understand. but from what they gave you, and I know you want to support them, we all want to support them, we all like them, we all know they're working hard. This is not fun for us. But we need you as the manager to say, all right, we've been doing this since November, but this got through and I didn't realize, and this is critical. It would be great if we could get something like that, because if not, we are where we are, and we have to budget, we have to balance, so.
I got it. My budget balanced, so it's a matter of prioritizing at this point.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
where they are, and we went through it with Public Works, we found some stuff.
Yep.
And that, we did have some ranges in there. With like fire and police, they really just don't have any further to go.
Yeah, and that's what we have to tell the community, that we can't
yeah.
cut anymore, so you have to do an override.
No, that's,
But we need everyone on the same page for that, and I think throwing barbs in memos doesn't help get us all on the same page. So I was a little disappointed in some of the stuff we got back today. Going to be frank, you're the boss. It would have been nice if you edited some of that. I think as a town, we have to be in lockstep so that the community understands how important it is that we get the override done, so that we don't have to cut services and have to cut departments and have to lose great people and lose long-term employees and all of it. So I would like us to be a little more, it's not us versus you, it's not us versus them, it's we have X number of dollars and we have X number of budget requests. And now we have to figure that out. So that's all.
So in some sense, what Peter was alluding to was with the budget package we got this year, he included a list of changes that he had already made to it. And I won't go through them, but there was over $3.1 million of capital removed from this budget before it got to us. There was another $1.4 million in personnel cuts removed from this budget before it even came to us. 3 police officers, 3 firefighters, 3 people in the DPW, and other things. Reducing the library, reducing the senior center hours. So very significant sacrifices made. And then there's a list of just general expense cuts, another $200,000 of just these routine cuts to town clerk education and records preservation, animal control, vehicle maintenance. And this, what Peter was just as specifically alluding to, is they went through and they cut out $200,000 of this before we started asking these questions. So all that's $4.7 million cut out of this before it came to us. So the budget was scrubbed. Now, whether it was, whether it can be tweaked or not is another thing, but there was a lot of work done on this before it came to us. You look like you want to say something, Al.
I don't know if I should.
Okay.
I do want to pick up on Stephanie's point, which is a good one. I understand what you're saying, Paul, that a lot of things have been cut out of this budget and a lot of pain has been created already. But that's not to say that we can then in any way diminish our responsibility to find any remaining budgets which may inadvertently have been over budgeted and correct them. I mean, we do need to go into this override on the same team, and I would think, or I'd hope, that Peter and his staff would, if reluctantly, nevertheless graciously accept the fact that if we find a problem with a particular budget item and correct it, that all we're doing is trying to convince the voters that this committee has done absolutely everything it can to minimize the amount of money that they have to pay in taxes. And if we can't do that, I think there's going to be a problem selling this override overall. So there are things in this budget. I think all of us have seen things in this budget that remain that perhaps should not remain, or at least remain as high as they are. And when we start going through that and people see that we've corrected it, hopefully that will bring some credibility to the entire process that ultimately ends up with X number of dollars in override.
Agree with everything you said. So we do need to come to a conclusion on this that equals our resources. So, so Donna, you were you had your sheet up there before. Well, are there more issues we want to put on the table or explore further? We've been through the 3 memos that we've received. We've asked Peter for any additional information he has learned in the last 48 hours that he wants to put on here. Have we surfaced everything? And is it now time to start going through the list of potential changes and voting on them? It's 7:30, so we have time. I think that's where we're at, unless somebody has something more they want to throw into the hopper. So, Donna, you have your
Okay. Let me put,
plug back in.
let me get rid of that change. I'm halfway through making the changes. I have not updated the tally tab yet. So the tally tab still has the same number in it that we had before. But just to give you an idea of what I've done is the tally tab, I added all the details of the ads, reductions, the revenue changes, yada, yada. And on the top of each page, I've got kind of a running total of where we are with all of the items that are in the spreadsheet. Unfortunately, that total does not include the $20,000 that I just added for hazardous tree, the reduction in the vehicles of 114,000.
And just to be clear, these are ideas that have been surfaced. They're
Right.
not,
Actually,
not a-
it's
not a
those are the
taken
only two.
position yet.
I just haven't had time to put them in the tally sheet. And I
So-
haven't added the line in the override section for the 504 yet. So
So-
those still have to be added to the tally.
Seeing the school district up there reminded me, I wanted to say that, talk to the superintendent, and he is, says they're well through the legal process with the PEC, the insurance, the employees group up there. He expects that he signed a memorandum of agreement with them, that is going to the school committee next Monday. He's not 100% certain the school committee is going to accept his entire recommendation that he made to us last week. He doesn't know. That he doesn't want to speak for the committee, so he wasn't going to presume when he knew what they were going to do with it. Which is why I say we're not ready to vote on an education budget yet, because we don't have a new assessment number. And of course, that is the single biggest number in the budget, so we can't reach any conclusions on things until we know that number.
Can you do me a favor? We had meeting minutes, right?
Yes?
If you do the meeting minutes, I'll have this done by the time you finish.
Well, that will take,
And then we'll have the tally going.
you better type
which
fast,
we
because you know
we
how
want.
quickly these go. So we circulated minutes from the March 11th meeting. Are there any comments on those, or somebody want to move?
I move that we accept the meeting minutes from March 11th.
I'll second.
Sarah, Jane seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Those are approved. And we had a meeting on March 12th.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes for March 12th.
Second.
Jane seconded again. Any discussion of those? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's the outstanding.
That's it.
You guys are too fast. No fair.
Just take the 2 minutes and get it done.
Oops, that's in the wrong place, that's why.
Well, maybe, can we talk about, like you had mentioned previously, that there might be a way to approve the school budget, but pending the override? Can we talk a little bit about that?
We absolutely can do that. When the warrant is prepared, I'm presuming that that article will be subject to an override, as as it has often in the past. Now, I don't know, because I take that back, because the override will be done by then.
Exactly.
Override will be done by then. But if we're going to approve it, we may want to approve it here pending an override. And if the override fails, then we would reconsider whether we want to recommend to the subsequent town meeting. Town meeting's been moved to June 8th, for those who have not heard that. There will be about a month of time for us to reconsider our positions based on whether the override passes or not. So I would think that we would not want to recommend unequivocally the education budget at this point, since it is still 3.9%, and we, our guideline is 3.2%. So it still is over, even though it's lower than it has been for the last couple of years, and probably lower than it's going to be for the next couple of years. It's still too high by our guidelines. So.
Well, and I think that education needs to be part of this override. It's
Yes.
the only fair way. It cannot be all
Agreed.
on the town, on the municipality. So how do we break down what amount we want publicized that is override for education? Is there a way to do that?
I don't know that you necessarily need to. As far as the ballot question would go, it will say for the purposes of funding the Wachusett Regional School District and municipal services.
Well, maybe not for the warrant article, but maybe for the communication plan out there, that I think we're all going to need. We're going to need the passion of the chiefs saying, you can't cut these positions because we have 20,000 people and we can't give you your service. We're going to want the schools to say, we need the override because of the funding formula, and it's the only way the towns can afford to do the education the way it is today. And, every department, the library and the senior center and everything else. So we're going to, as a town, hopefully it's Board of Selectmen, it's your office, it's us, that we're all out there, it's your staff. However, we can educate people to say, these are the items that are in the override, and this is what cannot be cut, or we are really going to have a problem. So I would like education. Maybe it's not for the warrant, Peter. It's just the line item says we need some of this.
Yeah, no, how about this? Essentially, when we built the budget, everything that was left over that we took out of stabilization was essentially to pay the school district portion. So you could say that's $2 million for the school district, and that's where it goes.
But I think we need to have both sides, we need to have all.
Oh, yeah, we'll have the
Yeah.
rest as
But
well.
that's
But your
fine,
question
yeah.
was for education. What
Yeah.
we're thinking.
And if 2 million is the right number or whatever that we say, generally we can't afford it because it's this much over, I'm happy with that. I want us all as a community to be on the same page about what the impacts are and why this is important. Because the first thing everybody says is, just cut your expenses. And we know what that feels like and how hard we've worked to do that. But we also know that that's what everybody just says. I mean, we have people running for office that says, we can cut expenses and still have better services. It's like, really? Because why? Finance. Okay, well, guess what? It doesn't work that way. This is the real world. We have a certain amount of dollars, and we have a certain amount of expenses we're trying to cover with those dollars. And this year, we don't have enough dollars. So we really need the community to consider very strongly increasing their own taxes, which we know is a big lift. Yep.
One of the things that I was thinking about proposing tonight is, because Paul had said to me the other day about making the school budget passing at town meeting contingent on the override, and I was thinking, well, yeah, we've hit all of the other departments, but we haven't hit education. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, well, why don't we put in the override the school budget that's over the 2.5%, which is 557,000 plus the 810 if it doesn't come down by that, into the override. And that way it does hit all of the, because otherwise we're cutting all of our town departments, but we're not cutting education. We're increasing education. And that doesn't seem balanced to me. So I mean, we could put in, and then, and put that in on the override and actually reduce our school budget proposal in here by that amount and not pass it if the override doesn't pass.
Al?
The problem with that, Donna, is we cannot split the Wachusett regional budget that the school committee is going to recommend. So assuming the override fails, their entire budget is still going to go before town meeting as a motion. And we can do nothing about that, save for telling town meeting that the finance committee voted against it if in fact we
Right.
wish to.
Right, or we have to go back to the
But we-
savings.
So putting anything in the override specifically about the school district, I understand what Peter's saying. The override is going to be very general to fund the school in general and general government budget, period. And it'll be, of course, an override number, but no breakdown of that number, I assume. Is that right, Peter? Yeah. That would be a normal way of doing it. So to try and put a specific number in there for schools is not going to be helpful anyway, because their whole budget's going to town meeting one way or the other.
Well, it's
But-
also possible when we get to the town meeting, if the override has failed, in between that 4-week period, the decision could be made to attempt a lower override at some point in the future, and make that one explicitly about education. We could have a separate override election just for $2 million just to fund education. And then at the town meeting, we could make the warrant contingent upon passage of that subsequent override, or some scenario like that. If there's a desire on the part of the Board of Selectmen to schedule a second override, if necessary.
There's not enough time between May 18th town
You could not have the second election before then, no.
Right.
But you go to town meeting, present a budget, and then have an override, have some of it contingent upon an override. If the override
Yeah.
is successful, the second override is successful, then it's approved. It gets ugly, but it's feasible. Robert?
What is the date that the school has to know, that the district has to know that budget's been approved or disapproved by all the towns in the district?
What date do they need a budget by?
June 30th,
It's June 30th? Okay.
because otherwise they go into a 1/12 of this year's.
Yeah, they're
Budget
able
vote.
to continue on, but they'll be operating on the same budget as they had last year, which means they couldn't hire any new staff for next year and all the trouble they have. We have gone as late as October without approving, December, without approving a school budget one year, which wreaked havoc up there, but, it's,
It means they have to reduce all their expenses in the meantime. And it's hard to lay off people and hire them back, kind of thing.
okay.
Sarah's got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah?
We do have the school capital items that we can put on the override. So that's really the only thing that I see that we have direct and total control over in terms of a school-related cost that we can say it's either on the override or it's not happening. As we've talked about, we're in a really interesting and challenging situation with our override being part of a big regional district. We just do not have the ability to say, if the override doesn't pass, the school budget can't be X, Y, Z. That's just not our purview. And we may be forced by town meeting, or we may be forced by 4 other towns to fund the school budget. But what I think we're going to have to work really, really hard to do is explain to the public that we do have a structural deficit. And so if they want education the way they want it, if they want municipal services the way they want it, if they want to be able to continue to brag and about, when I cross the line from Holden to Worcester, I can tell because of how horrible the potholes are. If we want to continue to have the level of service, we have to explain to them what a structural deficit is and tell them we're at the end of the line in terms of using savings to plug those gaps. And that kind of brings the schools a little bit into the conversation. But beyond that, it's just our capital, school-related capital, that we can actually say it's either the override or these don't happen.
Other than voting down or not recommending the school budget.
That's true. We can take that step. But that doesn't ultimately mean that the school budget won't pass.
Of course.
Right. So, what we don't want to do is I think, make claims, and when we're communicating about the override, that we actually can't, back up. That's my point.
Okay,
Okay, so I
Ready?
think the most straightforward set of discussion topics is on the revenue side.
Yep. Well, you want to do that first?
I think so.
Okay, all right, so,
Because we may want, if, depending on how much time we want to spend here this evening, we may want to give
okay,
all the expense cuts and everything a little time to
yep,
think about and/or get some more documentation or whatever.
right.
But I
Okay,
think the revenue has been kind of stagnant for a couple of weeks, although we have heard some things on that too.
yep. Okay, so, context of what we're going to do. In this spreadsheet, I've got the tally tab, and as I mentioned, I just made the changes that we had just talked about. I have a tally on the top of each page. It is the budget, the tally, just so everybody is grounded, is the budget impact. Red is negative, means we still have to make more cuts. Black would be positive. It is based on the number with or assuming the $810,000 good news that we got from the Wachusett Regional School District. That is an assumption. It has not been voted on by the school committee yet. It's not legally final yet. But what I did in the spreadsheet was based on that number. So if they come back on Monday and say, oh, you're not going to get that $810,000, then if we balance this tonight, we would be $810,000 over budget. I don't think we're going to get that far tonight, and as Paul said, they're going to vote on it on the school committee on Monday, so we should know when we meet again next week.
So for those who can't see this spreadsheet, assuming no major change from the school district, we're $184,000 in the red at the moment. Peter presented us with a balanced budget, and since then, there have been changes made. We had to add $50,000 to legal expenses because the MBTA vote was declined. We're going to have to fight that lawsuit. We added $34,000 to the petrol and diesel, which is the fuel line for all our vehicles because of rising gas prices. The district did bring us a $30,000 reduction when they were here last week or a couple of weeks ago, so that was good. And then the school assessments from both Wachusett and Montechusett came in over what Peter had estimated in the original budget. So we're $130,000 out in the red, starting with those numbers. So all told, we're almost $200,000 in the red at the moment. So we have to either come up with more revenue or cut the expenses for at least $184,000, pending a bigger change by the school district on Monday.
So the way this is going to go, to try to make us go through it reasonably quickly, I'm going to make a motion. Somebody needs to second it. We can have a discussion. If we need to have a discussion, we vote and we move on. If we have a majority vote, then the number stays where it is. If the vote is yes, if the majority vote is no, then we take the number off. So, simple one, we're on the petro diesel. We all know the price of that has gone up, and they had really cut those budgets down. I'm going to make a motion that we add $34,000 at the recommendation of the DPW across all of the petro diesel line items in all the departments to the base budget.
Are those included in the other tabs with expenses?
Yes.
So would we be better off just waiting until we go through that list and just do them all at once rather than trying to?
No, because then I have to redo the spreadsheet.
All right,
Those are
so
easy. I think
there's a motion on the floor to add $34,000 to the fuel line based on the rising costs as estimated by the DPW, who did the original estimates. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Discussion of this line item?
So we're voting this, just to clarify if I could, we're voting this, and then we're gonna, when we go and vote the different department budgets, it's gonna reflect this number as well, so.
That's an excellent,
We're going to be doing it this way.
right. Well, that's an excellent point. I have been pondering how we're going to do this, and I think we're going to go through, or we should go through and vote all these changes, and then basically vote the original budget as presented with these changes that we've made to it, not go through each of the 74 departments and vote on each one of them individually, as we have done in the past.
Okay, okay,
Alternatively, we could go to the treasurer's office and talk about the changes and vote a revised budget like we normally do, but in that we want to keep a running tally and do them kind of comprehensively, I thought we would vote on changes.
okay, that makes sense. That's a change, but it makes sense to me.
So basically what we're doing here is Peter gave us a budget on March 11th, which is the underlying figures that you're using here, correct, Donna?
Yes.
So we're running off the budget as presented on March 11th, and then these are changes,
Right.
Plus or minus to that budget.
And I'm
We will vote that budget and then each of these changes.
Yeah. I am assuming that we would eventually, though, get a new budget overview.
Oh, yeah.
Source profile, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
I was thinking about trying to get one for this evening, but the numbers kept moving so fast that it didn't make any sense to ask them to tie it all together.
And the DPW, on this particular line item, the DPW memo about the increases did break it down by department. So, so Lori would be able to go in and
Which is one of the reasons I didn't
By
want to try and vote each of the individual budgets again, because we'd have to go through that level of details on some of these. So we have a motion, and it's been seconded. Is there a discussion about adding to the fuel budget? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that one passed.
Okay, so we say yes to that one. The legal budget, we had reviewed the legal budget. Town manager had said that he needed to add, because of the NBTA Community Act lawsuit, he needed to add $50,000. So motion to add $50,000 to the legal budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Stephanie seconds. Is there a discussion of this item? Sarah and then Jane?
I asked this question last time or in the past, has the board taken an affirmative vote that they want to move that way versus trying to offer, an opportunity to present a different plan to town meeting?
No. They haven't expressed it to me if that was their.
Peter, your mic is off.
They haven't expressed that to me if
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to understand where our executive is on this, because I feel like I'm getting conflicting, or I have received conflicting information about how they want to proceed. I know that there were two members of the board, our executive. When I say our executive, I mean our Board of Selectmen, which is the head of our executive branch here in town. Two members who did not support the plan that went to town meeting, which obviously failed. But I also heard through unofficially, like in social media posts, that they wanted to pursue other plans. So I'm confused about those conflicting directives that I'm hearing.
So we have to make a decision based on what we know today, is my thought, right? What we know today is that we have a lawsuit in front of us from the state that we need to defend. Now, if that changes in 3 months, or if something does get passed and it gets dropped, but based on what we know today, and we're not going to know anything differently in the next week, we need to add to our legal budget.
Peter?
Just my opinion, nothing is going to happen on this for the next 6 months, one way or the other. Nothing's going to happen in the legal case. It's already becoming delayed, and I don't expect anything major even before the end of the year, to be honest with you. So, and I think if from a political standpoint, if you're talking about bringing another plan before a town meeting, after the first one lost and the second one lost 2-1, a third one's not going to do too well. So I don't expect that anyone's going to suggest that in the near future. I think we get through the fiscal year probably just worried about handling the Attorney General's lawsuit without really concerning ourselves with any tangential stuff.
I guess I understand what you're saying, but I see it differently, given that have seen board members express a desire to pursue an alternative plan that was more aligned with what folks in town wanted. So,
But we don't know.
we don't know.
I think Peter had told us when we first proposed this, is that we have to respond to the Attorney General's lawsuit in some way. Even if we're not fighting it or dragging it out or trying to do anything, we have to respond in some way, and we need some money in order to be able to do that at some point, in the future.
Maybe, but he also
While the town as a whole stumbles to a permanent solution, so.
potentially, but he also just said that he doesn't expect anything to happen within 6 months or maybe even this calendar year. So I still remain,
But there's still another 6 months in FY '27 that something could happen.
We will accrue legal fees of some kind. I'm just saying, everything right now is almost like a delay tactic in a sense. There is a lot of clarification that needs to be made. That's what we're going to be dealing with. I think a lot of towns don't understand what the Attorney General is asking for, and I think it was purposely vague because we're in uncharted waters. So a lot of it is just going to be a clarification action at this point, and not really even arguing the merits. It's going to be saying, what do you think we should do, and what do you propose that we could do, and what does the law allow us to do, and clearing up all of those issues, because it really is a totally gray area of law. And without getting into the merits and the prognosticating of what could happen, we will incur legal fees. We know this much.
Jane, are you still want to get in line?
The only thing I wanted to say, I've said previously, and that is it's very easy to run up a legal bill that's far in excess of $50,000 for something like this.
Stephanie?
This is an addition. We already do have legal line item in there. So I think with this addition, we're in good shape. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, right.
Al?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not going to discuss legal strategy because I'm not qualified to do it, although you are. But, I mean, there's a big difference between sending in a junior attorney to plead no contest to whatever the AG does versus reworking the Milton case again. And I think we at least have some idea what the position is on those two extremes before we start worrying about whether you need more money in your legal budget.
Well, except that we need to know the answer to that question within 7 days, so.
Yeah, well,
Maybe we can,
I took that. I didn't come up with that. That was an estimate from Myrick O'Connell.
I thought you said it was going to be handled in-house.
That is in-house.
Oh.
That's our counsel.
my point is, we know that there is some sentiment for this law never should have been passed, we should never be an MBTA community and all that good stuff, and we've already tried that route to some extent and lost. We've tried rezoning to comply and we've lost. So, I mean, we need some position from somebody that has the authority to do it, which is namely the board and or you, and to which way we're going, before we start talking about budgets for things. I mean, it's a relatively small amount of money considering our budget, but nevertheless, it's I think, irksome that we get yet another ad at the last moment here.
Other discussion of this? Sarah?
I was just going to add that, I don't think that we've seen the end of this issue in town. And I think that what I was very heartened by in this whole process was how engaged everybody got on wherever they decided they landed on the issue. I think that, you know, the pressure to make a decision now, okay, that can exist, but it's not like we can never go back to town meeting and appropriate additional funds. If the Board of Selectmen decides to fight and relitigate the Milton case, we're going to need more money, you know? So I don't know. I do feel a little bit underinformed, a little bit directionless, and I don't like being in that position.
Jane?
Can I make a motion?
I already did.
Already did.
Oh, your motion
This
is
is
to pass.
discussion.
This is a discussion, okay. We can-
Just to make it clear one more time, we're not fighting anything. We're getting sued. And so we can't control that. And I think it's pretty clear that no matter what happens, there's no way we'll have another vote within 6 months. And certainly not whether it would be a affirmative vote for compliance is a pretty long stretch at this point. So we're covering ourselves from the lawsuit that is coming to us. We're not fighting something. We're not trying to litigate something. This is purely defensive.
And if we had another vote, it would have to come out of savings, unless we had a town ballot to do an override for it,
Another vote?
right?
Oh, you mean another, like a special?
Yeah, like
town
if we
meeting?
didn't put this in here now, and in the fall, we found out, oh my gosh, we need the $50,000, and to Sarah's point, couldn't we have another town meeting? I guess the town meeting would be to take the $50,000 from the stabilization account.
That's what it would have to be, yes. If you could get 142 people in a room
Yeah.
for that one question. So,
I would just agree that I think the absence of direction from the Board of Selectmen is a problem here. It presents us with a budgeting problem. And so I would be happy to move this item either to the override or to take it off the list for the time being.
So there's not an absence of direction. They have directed me to defend the town, which is part of my job. And so we're defending ourselves against the lawsuit that is being brought against us by the Attorney General.
other discussion? So the motion is to add $50,000 to the budget, to the legal budget. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye? Opposed?
Opposed?
All right, so let's show hands. Aye? Marilyn, Alex, Donna, Robert, Stephanie, and I. Give Marilyn a chance to write here. Okay. And then nay? Al, Jane, and Sarah. So that passes.
I thought that was going to be an easy one, sorry.
There are no easy ones, Donna.
There are no easy ones. Okay, so now down to the revenue ideas. And this is one of the memos that we got this week, noting the amount of excise tax that has been collected as of the 20th of March and how much we collected between March 30th and the end of the fiscal year last year. So I'm going to make a motion to increase the excise tax revenue by $100,000.
Second.
Stephanie seconds that. Is there a discussion of this? Sarah?
One of the things that I took away from speed reading all the memos that I got today was that it's going to be easier for people to stomach additions on the revenue side, or maybe I'm making this assumption. It's going to be easier for folks to stomach taking on additional risk on the revenue side by increasing our projections versus cutting on the expense side. So I just wanted to kind of frame our conversation here. I know we've heard a lot, that, oh, this is risky, we're moving our numbers up, and that is true. At the same time, we have been generating healthy free cash, which Paul, provided to us today. And we know that if we don't increase our revenue projections, then we have to find it somewhere else, which is, as I said, a little bit more challenging. So I just wanted to kind of frame that up. I'm in support of these projected revenue increases.
Each one of these is proposed by an individual who cares deeply about their part of the organization. We need all revenue to exceed the total revenue forecasted. If the EMS revenue falls short of the forecast, but general revenue is over, we're good as a town. And we're averaging $1.7 million in excess revenue. So the fire chief is passionate about, he's not sure he can deliver 100,000 extra, and he has very real concerns. And each one of these has a level of risk to it. What we need is the overall revenue to exceed the overall estimate. And like I said, we're comfortably over $1.5 million every year in that. So adding a few $100,000 to these revenue estimates, I don't believe is a significant risk in the long run. Although each one of them may fall short, they're not all going to fall short. The history tells us. So, any other discussion of the excise tax? Robert?
Just a quick question. So, looking at the actual numbers, so the amount that was put in the budget overview that we got on 3/11 was already increased 200,000 from 3.3 from last year to 3.5. So this is to move it to 3.6.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And
The information we got today from the town accountant was that receipts through the end of February were $2.8 million. And that last year, in the fourth quarter, March, April, May, June, I guess 4 months, those receipts were $750,000, $760,000. So if this year's last 4 months are consistent with last year's last 4 months, we're going to wind up over $3.5 million for fiscal year 26.
you'll over 3.6.
3.6, we're going to be exceeding.
Over 3.6 million, okay?
So her numbers are that we will if we assume between now and the end of the fiscal year, we collect the same amount as last year, we will already be at 3.6.
For fiscal year 26. And then you have another year. You have another year of inflation and new car
Right.
prices going up and everything else. You know,
More than likely, we're going to collect more between now and the end of the fiscal year than we did last year, just like we have so far this year to date.
I don't have the
which
actual
would-
numbers right. in
I
front of me.
calculated that out. I mean, what we've collected so far this year is 4.1% more to date than we had collected to the same point in time last year. If we apply that 4.1% to the 763,407 that we collected last year, there's another $40,000. So it's pretty darn comfortable to increase this by $100,000 and be confident that we're going to collect it. And then to Paul's point, worst case scenario, if we don't, we're going to be over on other revenue areas because we always are.
I don't have Al's analysis, but earlier this year, he gave us an analysis of what these revenues have been for the past 10 or 12 years. And it's only gone down once, and that was the year after the pandemic, when cars were very, very hard to find and people just weren't buying them. Every other year it goes up, so it's not an unusual thing for this to increase. So with that said, is there further discussion of increasing excise tax estimate by $100,000? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, next one is I make a motion to increase the fire and EMS revenue on the EMS receipts line by $100,000.
Second.
Discussion of that motion. So for people who can't see what we're looking at, this line item has averaged over $1.5 million for the last 5 years. and we've budgeted much less than the actual amounts every year. So this is always very conservatively estimated, with good reasons. It's a risky, it's not necessarily risky, but you don't know how many ambulance runs you're going to make. You don't know how much you're going to collect from the insurance companies. There's a lot of factors that could make it go south, but they generally don't. And we are significantly under $200,000 under where we were 2 years ago. So with the rising prices and everything else, it's pretty safe to say we're going to match last year's. This proposal does not even bring it to the last actual. This proposal will bring the revenue estimate to 1.4 million. In 23, the actual is 1.7. In 24 is 1.5, and in 25 it was 1.5. So we're not even getting up to where we were 4 years ago with this motion. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote on adding $100,000 to the EMS receipts line. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So that passes.
Okay, next line item is the water sewer contribution to the general fund for the DPW building that they occupy. We had a motion, so let me start over. Motion to increase the water sewer department property contribution to the general fund by $100,000.
Did you make a motion on that, or did you just talk?
That was
about
my
it?
motion, yeah.
That was your motion?
Yeah, sorry. Motion to increase water sewer property maintenance contribution to the general fund by $100,000.
Second.
Discussion of this one. Jane?
Just a clarification. Is it by $100,000 or is it an increase from $75,000?
$75,000.
No.
Over two line items. Right now, it's $75,000. It would go to a total of $175,000.
We currently have $75,000 in the budget, which, so again, for people who are listening, the Water and Sewer Division is housed within the new DPW facility. They did not contribute to the cost of building that facility. The town did that through taxpayer funds. They do pay $75,000 a year for using a certain amount of space in that building and for the utilities and the upkeep associated with that. What we are talking about this evening is having them also make a payment to cover some of the debt service associated with the space, with building that building, which currently taxpayers pay all the debt service on that building, even though DPW is using a fairly significant, a not insignificant portion of the building. So that's what we're talking about. We're changing the calculation that has been done for the last, since the DPW building was opened. They've always paid rent for the space that they use. Now we're talking about adding a different way of computing that rent payment to include a portion of the debt service. So are you in line? Then, I'm waiting. I don't know who first. Okay, Robert, and then, okay, Sarah?
I don't recall, like, so you're saying that we're changing the calculation, how we compute the rent. What's it based on? Is this 100,000 the 18% of the annual debt service?
No.
No, okay, then I'm confused. Can you re-explain?
It was just to establish the fact that water sewer should be paying something because of the cost of constructing the building. If you took an actual 18% of the debt service, I think the number would be more in the $200,000 range or a little bit north of $200,000.
270, I think.
And the rationale here, although it is to pay for the construction of the building, the vote is actually to increase the rent line item so that to the extent possible, we don't get involved with debt exclusions, borrowing whatsoever. We're simply having water sewer pay more rent than they were scheduled to pay.
The concept is if you were going to rent any space, the landlord's going to charge you all the costs associated with that space, including the cost that he incurs for buying it himself.
Correct,
So
right.
right now, we're not charging that second piece to our tenant. We're only charging the actual day-to-day operating costs.
Right. And has the rent, Peter, remind me, has the rent increased on an annual basis, or has it been 75 flat for,
There was no rent before last year,
there was no rent before last year?
and it would, part of that 75,000, I believe, is paying maintenance costs and upkeep, and part of it is rent. Isn't that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
So there is a portion already rent. They can't pay the debt service because it's excluded debt, so we
Right.
can't say that.
Yeah.
Technically, theoretically, I guess you can call it rent. And again, is this 100,000 flat, or is now it's being asked for 175,000?
This request is for a total of 175,000.
All right.
So it would be an increase of 100 over and above the two line items, one for the utilities and maintenance of the building and the other for rent, so to speak.
I'm going to tell you that's pretty outrageous, and the water sewer commissioners are going to fight that. I probably at town meeting, they'll probably move to amend it at town meeting.
Can I just explain why I'm asking these questions? My reaction to the conversation that we've had is that that we need to look at this. I do think that there's some unfairness between the general fund and the enterprise fund. But I just don't, in some way, I feel like we've plucked the number out of thin air. So I'm a little bit of two minds. I would be potentially thinking, I want to hear what the rest of the discussion is, but I would be potentially thinking about offering an amendment to the motion, changing the amount potentially to lower it, to make it, I mean, I think that we're making our point, but I do think there's more data to be gathered, more of a holistic approach to the relationship between the enterprise fund and the general fund. What does our indirect policy actually look like? Can we get a copy of that? Can we see how that computation looks? For some municipalities, it's quite sophisticated. For others, it's quite simple. Others don't even do indirects. So I just feel like the number, I don't feel like it's on a solid foundation for me personally, but I do want to hear what the rest of the committee says.
Robert, did you?
Robert, were you trying to get in?
Because I have something too.
So I generally agree with everything you just said, because I recalled that when we were talking about this in previous meetings, that we were talking about increasing the rent from 75 to 100, which is why I think you asked your question, was it increasing it by or increasing it to? I don't remember it being an increase of 100,000, and that additional money, you know, because we were talking about rent and should the rent go from 75 to 100. That's an easy conversation to have. It's this additional 75,000 now that's being added to this that I don't really understand the calculus on.
Donna?
I'm in somewhat the same as what Sarah and Robert are, but not necessarily the same amount. I am not a commercial real estate agent by any means, but I did do some Google searching and found warehouses in central Massachusetts that were anywhere from $9 a square foot per year to $30 a square foot per year. If we include the maintenance in with the 75,000, I believe that comes out at like $10.70 a square foot per year, which is definitely on the, if the lowest of the low of the cruddiest warehouse that I could find was $9, then $10.70 is a bargain. If we went all the way to the other extreme, to $100,000, that would be $25 a square foot. So personally, I would be open to an amendment to the motion to, you know, add 50,000, making it $14 a square foot, or $75,000 to make it $21.40 a square foot.
Other discussion? Yeah. Al?
Except to say that the ATN Industrial includes specialized lab equipment constructed especially for water sewer. It's not warehouse equivalent. It's not empty
Yeah,
space
good point.
that these people move into. Quite the contrary.
Robert?
Who bought that equipment, though? Because if you're moving into a warehouse space, you would move in, and then you would do the build-out. So did water and sewer buy that, Or was that part of
That
the,
was part of the project that water sewer received the benefit of as soon as they moved in. As we've said all along, this building was constructed specifically with water sewer in mind, and all the facilities and all the equipment that they need to go along with that was all part of the project.
Because it's part of the town's interest to have the water sewer in one building where they had been separated for years prior.
So it has been very beneficial for both departments.
Yeah.
Sarah?
It makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, we don't want the water and sewer department or division whatever, to leave that space. It was constructed for them. It makes a lot of operational sense. There is potentially shared equipment. There's certainly, the work environment. On the other hand, the enterprise fund structure is supposed to account for all costs. And while you can subsidize it with the general fund, it's not a best practice for a town of our size and sort of arrangement, right? So we have to get on the same page about the enterprise fund structure. We are anticipating a significant amount of money coming from Worcester, and we've been asked, all of us I'm sure, have been asked, why are we having an override if we're going to have tens of millions of dollars coming into our town? And we've responded, we have an enterprise fund, which means those funds are sequestered, they cannot be used for other purposes. The other side of that coin is the enterprise fund paying its full costs, which includes the building that they're using. Now, whether or not people who voted at the ballot for that debt exclusion understood that they were then signing away or promising to continue to subsidize by continuing to pay that debt, we can probably debate. But I think I would suggest a compromise, and I would slice it in half as a first sort of offering. I guess you want me to make an official motion, or do you want to see if that percolates more discussion on what others think?
You can make a motion.
All right,
Motion to
no.
amend?
Yeah, I would make a motion to amend the original motion to reduce the amount from 100,000 to 50,000.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Stephanie seconded the amendment. Marilyn?
There was no one second the First Amendment. The first,
Yes, Stephanie
Motion.
did. Stephanie seconded.
you seconded it? I'm sorry then.
That's okay.
Keep us in line.
So your total would be 125, Sarah? That's the motion? Okay.
Okay. Discussion of the revised motion.
I can certainly support 50,000. I was probably going to say 75.
Robert?
quick question for Peter. Was there an understanding when this was built between DPW and Water and Sewer as far as what, I mean, they didn't sign a lease, obviously, but what was kind of the understanding from the outset?
There was no understanding. They had been historically separated into other buildings, and there was no agreement or discussion really as to what they would pay, if anything, upon moving in. But I mean, I think from our standpoint, that sounds fair. They pay $25,000 in maintenance costs and I think $50,000 in rent, so that would make the rent $100,000 a year.
Any further discussion of the motion?
As someone who looks at commercial garages all the time, that's a super reasonable number.
You want that deal?
I would love that.
I should have had you do the math instead of me doing all the Google searching.
Marilyn?
Explain the ending number. We're going to have
25,000.
125,000.
Yes.
So we're reducing that by 50, right? Okay. Thank you.
Well, Robert, I mean, Alex is making me rethink the 75 instead of the 50 then, if that's a incredibly reasonable.
Well,
Alex?
I think no matter what we do, we're going to get pushback from water sewer. So I think doing $50,000 this year is incredibly reasonable to make them like, listen, we got to adjust this. I think if you go to 75 or to 100, you're going to have them fight us at town meeting, which in my opinion is the last thing that we need.
That's a good point.
Sarah, you're set? Okay. So the motion has been amended to be adding a $50,000 to DPW rent for the space on Industrial Drive. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? So that passes.
Awesome.
So now we need to vote the original motion, right? Because we voted the
No,
amendment.
we amended it down and we voted the amended amount.
But I think we still have to vote the original motion.
It was a
I
motion.
think so.
Let's do it. It'll take us 2 seconds.
All right, so the amended motion is $50,000. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
I guess
Next.
the amounts are exactly identical. Anyway,
So just to explain,
yep,
so my motion to amend needed to be voted as allowable, and then the original motion still stood with, so I'm really explaining because I know that there are lots of people paying attention online. They want to understand.
very good.
Okay, the next item here, I have it in yellow because it overlaps with, not on this page, it overlaps with the ad. So I'd like to look at that one line item on the ad first, and that was, let me find it first. No, reductions, sorry. This line item for moving the $15,750 to the NOAC account and removing it from the rec budget, which we talked about very briefly at the beginning of the meeting when we were going through the DPW list of items, and Peter said it was a double count. It should be removed from the rec budget. It was intended to be part of NOAC. Am I understanding you correctly?
No, it should be removed from DPW, 'cause it's already in NOVAC.
Is it NOVAC?
Yeah.
I thought so, and I meant to look that up because I found something on the website that said NOAC, and I think that's where we got it. So it's NOVAC.
It's spelled with a W, but it's pronounced.
Oh,
with
it's
the-
pronounced, it is spelled with a W, but it's
Yes.
pronounced Novak. Okay, thanks. So I'll leave it as Novak, and get my pronunciation correct. So it should be removed from you're right, thank you, can be removed from the DPW budget. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion, just so that we're all in sync with the numbers, that we are going to remove $15,750 from the DPW budget for the turf maintenance of Novak Field, because it's already in the
Is there a second
Novak.
for that?
Okay. So,
Jane, Sarah, Stephanie now seconded that. Take your choices. Okay, is there a discussion of this? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So that one passes.
okay. So now I'll go back to the revenue increase ideas, because we had a combination idea here that totaled $16,000, totaled $60,000, but the $60,000 included the $15,750.
Correct.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here on the reductions. No, I'm going to go over here on the revenue increases, and I'm going to take $15,750 off of the $60,000. And I got to do the right thing here. Okay, so now if I go back over here, it's $44,250. The remaining that we can talk about that in the discussion. So I'll make a motion to increase, wait a minute, let me read this. I do have to read it because there were adds and there were reductions and it was all in the same. So so the proposal is to increase rec revolving contribution to the general fund by $40,000. And I think that $20,000, Al, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a rounded number from the 15,750?
It was. I think if you want to make matters simpler, just increase the general fund by $40,000.
Okay.
Forget about the washing of Novak Field costs, or not, which, whatever your preference is.
I
Okay.
think that's really what we're voting on at this point, right?
It's 40, yeah, it's just getting to the right number.
Yeah.
So the motion is to increase the revenue by increasing the rec revolving account contribution to the general fund by $40,000.
Second.
Discussion of this motion. Donna?
I know we haven't reviewed the whole rec budget yet. I believe we do that next Wednesday, but because I knew that we were going to be voting or considering this tonight, I went through and I looked at both the revolving account and their expenses, and after I got uncomfortable is the bottom line, because they have expenses in recreation of more than what they have in revenue. So each year, because of that, the balance that is in the recreation revolving account is going down. And at some point, either the fees for recreation are going to need to be increased in order to equal their expenses, because right now, I've forgotten the number. I can never remember if this one is in the back of the book or in the front of the book. I think it's in the front. Yeah. Whoops, sorry. For those watching, you can tell that we have a lot to go through. Okay, their recreation revolving account is on page 18 of the budget book. And in fiscal year 25, their revenues were $1,097,000, and their expenses were $965,000. So they were good that year. For this current year, fiscal year 26 that we are in right now, their revenues are $1,056,000 and change, but their expenses are $1,382,000 and change. So their expenses in this current fiscal year are $326,000 more than what they're collecting in revenue. They do have an ending balance of $748,000 after that occurs, because they will have drawn down the rec revolving account by that $326,000 that they're over budget by. If that continues, because we don't raise fees, whether it be before and after care fees, pool fees, summer camp fees, which, by the way, we can't really do for fiscal year 27 because they're already taking applications for the pool, the summer camps, and I had a question about before and after care.
We can't raise before and after care because of federal funds that
Because of the federal funds. So we can't increase the fees. So for the next, if we continue the way we are now, we basically have 2 years' worth of money left in the revolving account before it goes down to zero. And we've had the discussion about, this is a payroll account, so they need some money in there always to flow the payroll. so that they don't get to the point where they haven't collected the fees yet, but they owe, they need to buy the supplies for camp, and they need to, pay the people to come in for training, and, that kind of thing. So I became very uncomfortable and I don't believe I'm going to support this $40,000 increase in revenue.
Sarah?
The only thing to keep in mind, Donna, is that a revolving fund is not an enterprise fund. It is.
What does that mean?
It means that public rec departments do not earn enough money to cover their costs typically, and they are not designed to do so. A revolving fund is not an enterprise fund, meaning that it's not a sequestered fund that, the Board of Selectmen, it's their purview to set policies about cost recovery through their fees. And that's a separate, it's different from an enterprise fund. So it doesn't, you have identified a structural deficit, but it's very typical for a general fund to subsidize some of that programming, in my experience.
Which we are not having to do now.
Which well, I don't know, it's a little bit complex, but we did this year in 26, well, no, correct. I see what you're saying.
So I think what you're saying is that means that in a year or two, the general fund will have to start supporting the recreation budget.
In the absence of fee increase.
Which we are already doing with our debt.
Right, which we are already doing.
In a big way.
Period, yeah. So I think I think the question is, what balance level are we comfortable with? I think it's a little bit of an odd, fight to say we have to protect, a certain, I think we need a balance in the revolving fund. I don't disagree with that sentiment. Where I think we're needing to really get down to the detail is, what does that balance need to be? And the memo that we received from the department didn't really speak to the numbers. It spoke to the process, which was helpful, certainly helpful, but it didn't really speak to the numbers. And so we need to think more so about that balance. You're right, it did drop. I think if we were to see more history, we would see that it was lower and then it went up, and now it's come down. I think that we also have to keep in mind that there is a balance in that grant fund for the before and after school program too. So I guess the bottom line is, in this current fiscal environment, I'm comfortable with the $40,000. I think that we need to ultimately come up with a longer-term plan on what's an appropriate balance in that fund. How do we balance having money in that fund while also dealing with our structural deficit on the general fund side? And, but we have time to do that. I think the number that we have in our budget book, that negative $300,000, that one was wrong, right, guys? It was ultimately for 27 as is. The balance is projected to be 446. So if we add the 40,000, it's still over 400,000. If I'm doing my math right.
Remind me of how the grant works.
What grant?
The before and after care grant in this account.
It stems from original ARPA money, starting from COVID, and it comes almost randomly with no promise that it'll ever come again for some reason. So we apply and we get it, or we're not promised it anytime after that. Part of accepting it means that we cannot raise rates on the users.
And there's like 500,000?
Essentially, yeah, it's there to subsidize when we have to raise salaries, which we have to do, and what we had to do in this period, but we couldn't raise rates. So it's kind of paying for that in some ways.
So how long do we think that 500,000 will last?
I don't know. However, with regard to this whole thing, I guess my only request is that you maybe hold on it, because it's only a small number. I think a lot of this stems from thinking that rec isn't paying enough in certain aspects of what they do, and I think when you speak to the rec director, you might find that they are. And they are paying, and especially once we start breaking down the Novak fields and all the expenses and all the, what the revenue is projected to be, I think that would help you out a little bit. But as you saw, they're not making any kind of a profit right now. They're at a loss, and they're at a pretty sizable loss. And that stems from a few different things. The pool was losing whatever it was, 10,000 gallons an hour last summer, and so they were paying a really high water bill. Hopefully that starts to get rectified, but again, we have to change the fee structure and the pass structure, I guess, to allow out-of-towners to come in, and we tend to charge them more. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But as it is a small number, I think it would benefit everyone to actually speak to the rec director and see numbers a little bit more clearly.
Stephanie?
I was going to say the same thing. We know we've got some fixes that are coming in, and we also know that a lot of the revenue comes in fourth quarter because all the pool passes are collected, all the summer camps are collected. So we don't know that the deficit's going to be over $300,000 at this point. So I think that is a projection that we don't have any history for. So, but I'm fine if Peter thinks that number is, wrong and we need to talk to them, or I'm fine holding on that number until we talk. Oh no, I guess we can't. We have to have it done.
Yep.
Whatever.
Okay.
I don't know that deficit's going to be as bad as it looks at this moment. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Al?
I'm also comfortable with the $40,000 number. If you go into the rec budget, it's in the 230 range on the pages. There are some significant increases that have happened in fiscal 26 and are carried through to 27. All-day staff, water has increased tremendously, large percentage. And the online services is something that we haven't talked about recently, but there was a time when we encouraged the then rec director to look at use of Unipay, which is significantly less cost, at least it was at the time, for the system they're using. And the then rec director swore that it couldn't possibly be used for recreation, yet there's many communities in Massachusetts who are using it. That's a $30,000 number all in itself. So yes, their expenses are exceeding their revenue apparently, but with their surplus that they'll still carry, and with the fact that I think we need to make a decision one way or the other before we talk to recreation, unfortunately, I think we should approve this for now and then have recreation over the next year or so figure out what they need to do to remain solvent and to pay their fair share of the facilities that they use and of the labor and DPW that they use, which they're currently not doing. And that's the purpose of this $40,000, to try and remedy some of that.
As Peter mentioned, at some point, the fee structure has to be addressed. And when that is done, they're going to benefit from having a better, more complete sense of what it costs to run this department. So I think we ought to add this information in there so that when they do get around to resetting the rates, they know they're recovering enough money. I will point out that what we're driving for now is to get a budget so that we can determine what override levels. Once we talk to the rec director, if she absolutely blows us away and convinces us is wrong, we can reverse that before we go to town meeting with the actual budget. $40,000 in a $5.5 million override isn't going to swing us from 5 to 4.2 or something like that. The override's going to be a rounded number anyway. So I suggest we approve this, put it in the budget, and if the rec director talks us out of it next week, then we can change our mind at that point. But I think it's fair now to do. And I'm not worried about the fund running out of money because that's somewhat in our control. And if it does run out of money, as Sarah mentions, well, at that point we can start subsidizing it, but we can wait for that to happen. And we do need this money in general fund now, so I think it's fair to do. Further discussion?
Can I ask one more question before we vote? The debt for the borrowed money for the pool house reconfiguration for the rec offices, Peter, I believe we said is going to come out of here also?
I think that's the intent.
Yeah,
Should we
that's what
actually
you
do
had
it?
said, because we took we took the payment of that off the budget. So we're already going to be hitting this budget by the additional cost of building their offices over there. It's, I don't know if it's in the book that way, though. But that is, I'm glad I remembered that before we voted, because I think that their revolving account is already going to get hit with that.
No.
Or it's going to,
Doing debt or something.
say it again?
I didn't think it was coming out of the revolving. I thought we were doing something.
I didn't originally, but I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, sometime in the last couple of weeks, Peter said, no, the intent is that that would get paid for out of rec.
Right. Yes.
And that would be the debt service portion.
So that makes me not want to pass this
Right,
even
but
more.
It's going to be debt, though, not. it's gonna
It'll be,
debt service.
yeah, it's $500,000 worth of debt, so at whatever rate, it might be, I don't know, $60,000 a year.
No, as long as the borrowing doesn't occur before December 31st of this year, there's going to be no fiscal 27 debt charge.
That's true. That is true. You are, I learned that last week.
So it's-
But it will be ongoing. I'm concerned if we change this, then what happens next year when we're building the budget? Because we've changed the,
Well, hopefully by then, the
That is,
selectmen have gotten involved and, you know, adjust the fee structure.
yeah, it's for a very clever rec director and a very clever town manager and board of selectmen to figure out before next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah,
Not
you're
for
right.
The
us to
question is,
figure out now.
is it a good budget or not, is separate from, you know, the
Yeah.
fee structure.
yeah, okay.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on increasing the rec revolving fund contribution to the general fund by $40,000. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Donnison, no. 8-1.
Alex was no, I think.
Was Alex? I'm sorry. Alex was no also? Alex, you were no also? Okay. All right, so that's the end of the revenue. I think
And it's 10 and 9.
we have run out of time and energy. Next, the last thing on the agenda then would be to decide when we want to meet next.
Tuesday.
And I think we're looking at Tuesday.
Yeah, I think so.
I will need to check to make sure this room is available.
I believe it is.
It normally is, but you never know. And that would be 3:31. So I will do that and let you know. Peter, are you available that day? Good.
And can we decide what our approach will be when we come back on Tuesday? On Tuesday, we will.
Exhausted. I am so sick and exhausted. I have to go.
Go home, Steph, that's fine. So we'll know about the schools
Yes.
on Tuesday, and then we can do the reductions in the ads.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest if we could, that we concentrate specifically on budget items, and only when we're done with that, address the override.
Yeah, so the reductions and any specific budget ads first, and then the override is last. Yep, I agree. Okay.
Is it possible, or does it make sense to try to get an updated budget overview, given that we've got, some things will be no longer in flux?
Why?
Why?
I don't think
don't
we're going to
know.
need it. We've got this tally. So
Okay.
for
And
instance,
we're confident, because I just don't want at the end to be like, oh, let me see
Well,
your spreadsheet and my
a good
spreadsheet.
point.
Oh, they don't speak to each other.
we're going to have to.
Okay,
balance.
that's fine.
Well, I mean,
Change something else between now and then.
yeah, I mean, if we are off by an item, which could happen because there's not a lot of time. I mean, we've got a week. We'll have to solve for that. That's true. Yeah, right, yeah. Okay.
All right, so we will meet again next Tuesday here, if possible. I will let you all know that as soon as I get that clarified. And so we're adjourned.